not encouraging or advising anyone to modify their firearms. This is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Hey, what's up everyone? This video will be about fitting a trigger to a 1911 or 2011 style pistol. There will be links in the description to videos of mine about related components, systems, and tuning. For the most part, I will be considering this as the process of fitting a new trigger to an existing pistol. I feel like that will be the more likely scenario a lot of you may find yourself in. Let's get into it. Before any fitting occurs, I check the trigger bow. A lot of these will be stamped or laser cut, and they may have some burrs or rough edges around their circumference. I just take those off and smooth them out with a stone or some, fine sandpaper, 400, 600 grit wrapped around a file. And I'll go around and just deburr and smooth out all those edges. Make sure the bow isn't bent. On single stack pistols, make sure the bow slides easily over the magazine body. Bent trigger bow is a bit difficult to straighten out. If you bend it, which I've done, of course, there are stirrups for this. I would recommend one of these. Use it as a die to reshape the bow. I didn't know about these at the time, and I was able to straighten mine out without the stirrup, but it was a bit of a pain. If it comes bent from the manufacturer, it should be returned to them. Binding on the magazine isn't really an issue with the double stack pistols. The trigger bow sits above the magazine catch in the grip, and that is where the magazine body starts to taper up towards the top, so there's significant clearance between the bow and the magazine body itself. I check the trigger shoe slot and the trigger bow channel in the grip module or the frame, and look for roughness, sharp edges, burrs. If you're fitting the trigger to an existing pistol, hopefully no cleanup is needed here because you don't want to compromise the finish. If I'm building a pistol and the frame or grip will be finished later, I sometimes will get in these areas and smooth them out and break sharp edges. Generally, it's not needed. With polymer grips, there may be some mold flashing or little chunks of plastic hanging onto edges that you'll want to take off. For aluminum or polymer grip modules, I'll use some sandpaper wrapped around a fine file and get in there and smooth up what I need to. On steel grips or frames, I use stones. There are special stones you can buy that are specifically sized for the trigger bow channel, but likely a small stone assortment will have something that will work and allow you to get in there. If you do this, only remove enough material to smooth things out, right? We aren't removing material from the grip or the frame to fit the trigger in. We will be removing material from the trigger to fit the grip or the frame. I'm going to be demonstrating this with the double stack grip module and trigger because A, I need to fit this trigger to this, and B, it's a bit easier to see. The first thing is to check the fit of the shoe. Generally, when you put it in, it'll stop right about there. Make sure it moves freely up until this point. You can also flip it around and put the trigger bow in and make sure it slides like that. If you flip it around and the trigger bow is tight in the grip or the frame, you probably need to take care of that first before fitting the shoe. Skip ahead to the next section of the video, take care of that, and then come back here. Anyways, the trigger shoe will likely stop about here because it will be too tall to go into the slot. If this is the case, I generally take material off the bottom. But honestly, it probably doesn't matter if you take material off the top or the bottom. I would pick one side and stick with that. If the trigger shoe is a dark color, like this anodized black one, you may want to take material off the top because the shiny unfinished aluminum may be less visible up here. Sometimes there will be a little gap down here and you'll be able to see that sliver of the brighter material. Sometimes triggers are too wide and material needs taken off these sides when fitting as well. I would take an even amount off each side and keep the trigger centered. EGW does make trigger fitting gauges. These measure the trigger shoe slot height. It's hard to get in there and measure it with calipers. Those may be helpful if you're new at this. If the trigger is too tall and too wide, it can be hard to tell where material needs to be taken off for it to fit. These gauges may be helpful in that case. At this point, I just take material off one side of the shoe until I can just get it in this slot. It may be a little bit tight and there may be a little bit of drag, but as long as I can get the trigger all the way forward, I stop there. The bow is not likely to be too wide this way unless it's bent. If it's still tight, that's pretty odd. The bow material is pretty thin. There's not a lot you can take off here. You may need to stone the bow channel in the frame to get it opened up. What's more likely is that the very front or the very back of the bow here is too tall for the height of the trigger bow channel. A lot of the single stack and double stack triggers either have like these fitting ears back here, or they're relieved in the center and taller back here, so there's only one area that needs fit. I Sharpie up the top and the bottom of the bow and put it in there, and if it's stiff and dragging, I'll push it back and forth and then pull it out and see where my Sharpie is gone. Remove material as needed. I generally take it off the top of the bow. On a separate grip module like this, you're not likely to run into this yet. The grip is the bottom of the channel and the frame makes up most of the top of the channel. There, I suppose could be some rubbing here or some rubbing here, but again, not likely. We'll take a look at this later when I put this grip on the frame. So your trigger should go all the way into the grip or frame now. Maybe there's a little drag, maybe it's a little bit tight. Now we do the fine fitting to get that nice drag-free slide. The way I judge the drag-free slide is holding the grip, down at a 45-degree angle or something like that, and tapping the trigger up. And if it doesn't return all the way back down, then it's too tight in there. Generally, just a little bit more material will be taken off the top or bottom of the shoe. You can see that this trigger hangs up and drags a little bit, and I know it's at the shoe because my bow is loose in there. Again, can check it like that. I probably just need to smooth out some of this mold flashing. It looks like the bottom of the shoe is worse there. So that's the fit that I want right there. Hold it down at about a 45-degree angle and just tap that trigger and it should slide back forward. You don't want to take too much material off the top or the bottom of the trigger shoe because a trigger shoe with up and down wiggle feels like shit. Once you get the nice drag-free slide in there that you're looking for, if it's a single stack pistol, you're pretty much done. You can move on to a final check of the bow, deburr as necessary if you did any fitting, and polish it. If you're working on a pistol with a separate grip, we have more work to do. Your grip module needs to be properly fit to the frame before this next part. I have a video about grip module fitting if you want to check that out. Put the grip on the frame. You don't necessarily need to put the screws and bushings through, but hold it up and oh no, my trigger's binding. Top of the trigger bow channel is right here, and it's pinching the top of the trigger bow back here at these fitting ears. So take a little bit of material off the top of these ears with a file or something. Just a few swipes. See, I just barely made little flat spots. You want to sneak up on that fit. Put the trigger back in the grip, put the grip back up on the frame, and nope. More. So it is moving. Oh, we're almost there. It's just a light drag. But there's also something else going on at the back here, and I'll show you that in a moment. As I'm getting close on the fit there, I will Sharpie up my little ears here just to make sure that that's where I'm still contacting and hanging up. The Sharpie trick is a good one in general. Like, I knew it was going to be rubbing back here at the ears, but if you're unsure about it, the first time you put it in and you feel drag here, Sharpie up the whole top of the bow and slide it back and forth. A little scuff mark there, a little scuff mark there, so I know I have just a tiny bit more to take off on the top of these ears, and then my fit will be good. Let's take a look at the binding at the rear of the trigger travel, and I've come across this on all 3 Chile frames I've fit triggers to. The bow is just a little bit too wide for the distance between here and here on the frame. We need this trigger bow to slide all the way back and come up against these faces at the back of these little ears. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just make sure to deburr these edges. I found them to be a little rough before, and I'll put a little chamfer on them like this, and then see if that cleans it up. So you can see the little chamfer I made on the front of this and up and around the top right here on both sides, but the trigger bow is still too tight in there, so actually I have to open these walls up a little bit, and it's pretty hard to get in there with a file or sandpaper or something. So this is where I'll use my Dremel and one of these fine little tapered grinding bits. And I can tell it's not hanging up much, so I just did a tiny bit, and I'm gonna check it. It's already looser. I'm very nearly there. There's a little corner down in here that the tip of my bit didn't quite reach down into. These little bitty tapered square point diamond bits are the bee's knees for this. All right, that got it. I am gonna go back through here with some fine sandpaper on my file as well, and just make sure I smooth out this surface and all these chamfers, and then give it a quick polish before I call it good. Hopefully you won't have to do something like this if you're trying to fit a new trigger to, an existing pistol. So now one more check. So we don't want up and down play in the trigger shoe, and we don't have that if we did a good job fitting the shoe, but there's generally going to be some side to side play. And on polymer shoes, I'll show you a cool trick. What I do is I take a soldering iron with a little tip like this. Usually it ends up happening kind of up here and down here. I'm pretty much at the back of the trigger shoe right here. I mean, I still have some pre-travel to take out of this, but that top corner and kind of the bottom area below the set screw are still within the grip module. So I'll just take this and I'll just melt a little bit of plastic outward at the top and bottom on both sides, and then file it back or sand it back to fit the width in the grip module, and then it will get rid of that side to side play. You could probably do this with an aluminum shoe. What you'd probably want to do is take a center punch and a hammer and stake the back of it and try to kind of displace some metal out to the sides, but the anodizing is brittle. It may crack, and if you displace too much material and have to file it back, you'll have a shiny spot on the side of your shoe that may show through in your trigger guard. So I wouldn't recommend trying to do that with an aluminum shoe. Oh yeah, that's sweet. No side to side play now, and no up and down play. Now that my trigger is fit to the frame or grip and frame with that nice drag-free slide, I recheck the bow for any roughness or burrs, especially if I did any adjustments or fitting, and I'll go through and stone those areas and make sure I break any edges. And then I polish the trigger bow. Trigger bows generally come with a nice finish, but I still do a little bit more just in the interest of the best trigger feel I can get. It goes really quick with a Dremel with a cotton buffing pad and some polishing compound. Single stack bows, because they might come into contact with the magazine, I do the inside of the bow. Double stack ones, I don't bother doing that. I do pay more attention to the trigger bow at the rear where these fitting ears are and make sure I polish the tops and bottoms of those really good, and then the back of the bow where it's going to come in contact with the disconnector. I tried to, cover all the things I've ran into while fitting triggers, and I even showed you some of the little, nitpicky things I do to try to get the best fit, and, the smoothest possible sliding action and all that. But generally, fitting a trigger is pretty straightforward. You might have to take some material off the top and bottom of the shoe, maybe a little bit here. You check the bow and deburr it, maybe polish it if you're feeling fancy. After you reassemble the pistol, of course, you do your safety and function checks. The first link in the description is to my video about those safety and function checks. After that, you'll likely need to adjust your pre-travel and over-travel. There's a link in the description to my detailed video about that as well. I hope this was interesting or helpful to you in some way. Leave your trigger fitting tips and tricks in the comments so that I and others can see them, and we can maybe learn something. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you next time.